first grade teachers. Welcome to the Unit at a Glance video on demand. The purpose of this video is to provide you with an overview of the standards, intended pacing, and sample instructional strategies for Unit 4B, Meaningful Measurements. In this portion of the video, we are going to review the AKS and Indicators of Achievement, or IOAs, for Unit 4B. The AKS are the overarching knowledge and skills that students are expected to master. The IOAs are the learning objectives that allow students to demonstrate mastery of the AKS. In Chapter 2 of the video, we will look to see how the AKS and IOAs in this unit are paced in detail. Let's look at the AKS and IOAs we will be teaching in this unit. Unit 4B is a continuation of Unit 4A from Quarter 3, and we'll finish teaching AKS 6. In this unit, we will focus on denominations of money and continue to analyze graphical displays of data to answer relevant questions. Under the AKS, you will find the Indicators of Achievement, or IOAs, that we are teaching at this time. The IOAs go into further detail about the expectations for the standard. For AKS 6, we are working on the IOAs 6C and 6D. IOA 6C involves identifying the value of a quarter and comparing the values of like sets of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. Students learned the attributes of and values of pennies, nickels, and dimes in kindergarten. Now, in first grade, we will introduce the attributes and value of a quarter. Students will compare the value of sets of coins, like comparing the value of 2 quarters to the value of 6 dimes. Students will use counting and place value strategies to find the value of the sets of like coins and use their background knowledge of comparing 2-digit numbers to compare the value of the sets. IOA 6D is revisited again this quarter with a student-driven investigative question to fully engage in the framework for statistical reasoning. This IOA will also be integrated with 6C as students sort and create graphical displays of coins. Students will analyze the data by asking questions and answering them. Let's look at the pacing guide to see how the AKS and IOAs have been paced out over the course of Unit 4B. In the top portion of the pacing guide, we see the name of the unit, the big ideas for the unit, and the suggested pacing. Unit 4B will focus on measurement and data reasoning. The suggested pacing for the unit is about 3 weeks. In the next box, we see the AKS and the IOAs that will appear in this unit. For AKS 6, we will begin and end the unit with the IOA 6D, as it is integrated with 6C. Most of the instructional time will be spent on IOA 6C. The left column of the pacing guide will list the progression through concrete, representational, and abstract strategies. The bullets indicate the learning objective for the day, as well as any suggested manipulatives. The right column of the pacing guide shows the instructional resources that align to the intended learning objectives for each day of instruction. You will either see instructional resources linked for the numeracy components of a traditional teacher-led lesson or a task-based lesson, which will be your full numeracy block for that day. For IOA 6D, we begin the unit with a 2-day task-based lesson where students will be engaged in the full statistical reasoning process, from asking a statistical investigative question to collecting and organizing the data, representing the data with a graphical display, analyzing the information by asking and answering questions about the data, and interpreting the results. Students have engaged in this process several times throughout the year. Let's open up this lesson to take a closer look. You'll notice that this lesson is intentionally very open-ended to allow the students to ask a question that matters to them and is relevant to their class, their school, or their community. There are some possible questions listed in the launch of the lesson to give teachers some ideas of questions students may generate. The goal is for students to take the lead in making decisions throughout the process, how they will collect the data, how they will organize the responses, selecting the type of graph to display their data, and generating questions that can be answered from the graph. There are also some guiding questions in the culminating debrief to reflect on the process with the students and compare the graphical displays students have created, and to read beyond the data generated. IOA 6D continues as 6C is introduced with a task-based lesson on the attributes and value of a quarter that students will then apply to be able to sort collections of coins to answer a data collection question. This will give students an opportunity to revisit their background knowledge of pennies, nickels, and dimes as they learn to distinguish those coins from quarters. As 6C continues, students will learn to represent the values of like sets of coins concretely with base 10 blocks. Find the values of the sets of coins using place value understanding and counting strategies, and then compare the values of the sets. At the representational level, students may use a hundreds chart or draw coins and draw base 10 blocks and count by ones, fives, or tens to find the value of the sets of coins. The important thing to remember is that in first grade, the sets of coins that students are working with will always be the same coins. For example, 4 nickels compared to 3 dimes. Throughout the unit, you'll also see activating strategies that will continue to build students' understanding of the attributes and values of the coins, specifically the quarter, comparing the values of individual coins, and comparing the values of like sets of coins. Chapter 3 of the video will highlight specific instructional strategies that will be utilized in this unit for the IOA 6C. Please refer to the Analyzing the Standards, the ATS, for guidance on additional instructional strategies for each IOA. Let's dig into IOA 6C. Identify the value of quarters and compare the values of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. Okay, so the beginning of this IOA is all about identifying the value of a quarter. In kindergarten, students learned how to name and they knew the value of our pennies, nickels, and dimes. So in first grade now, we are introducing the quarter to our students. So the beginning of this is really thinking about the attributes of this coin, right? So when we're thinking about a quarter and introducing it to the students, we want them to have a quarter that they can touch and hold and see and look at and just start noticing all of the attributes of quarters. So we want them to see that a quarter is round, it is silver, it's a larger coin than the pennies, nickels, and dimes. We also want them to look more closely and see that the edge of a quarter is bumpy or has ridges like a dime does. It's not smooth like a nickel and penny are. They will see, oh, there's someone's face on the front, letting them know, okay, this is George Washington, whose face we see on the front of a quarter. Then flipping over and looking at the back of a quarter. Most quarters, maybe not nowadays, but they had the bald eagle on the back. You may want to bring in some real quarters to your classroom so that you can show them that now we have the state quarters. So there could be all kinds of different things that they might see on the back of a quarter now. They may even look closely at some of the words they see, United States of America. They might notice liberty, the word liberty on the front, but really thinking about those attributes of a quarter that will distinguish it from the other coins, right? And then knowing that the value of a quarter is 25 cents. Now, we have included anchor charts that talk about these different attributes, the value of the coins, and then the attributes to help distinguish it, along with anchor charts for the penny, nickel, and dime, which are the same as those anchor charts as they saw in kindergarten. So it'll just be a continuation, really building on that understanding, that background knowledge that they have from kindergarten about those three coins, and now extending that to include a quarter. So knowing the name, value, and attributes of a quarter. So at that point, then we're going to kind of go back to that and thinking about, all right, now if I have a set of coins, right, there's going to be a task-based lesson where students are now using that background knowledge to do some data collection, to sort the coins based off of those attributes, help them remember things like, oh, the penny being copper, brown colored, seeing, oh, the nickels here, noticing those smooth edges, those attributes that they see on the front and the back to help them group our nickels, seeing those small dimes with those ridges on the edges, and now being able to recognize and sort a quarter. So they should be able to name each of these coins, recognize them based off of those attributes, as well as knowing the value now of all four coins. Moving into the next part of this IOA, after students have identified and know the value of a quarter, they are then able to compare the values of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. So we also have included in the lessons on the pacing guide another anchor chart that will be helpful for students to have, for you to have up in your classroom, and even have some smaller versions that students can keep in a math journal with the names of each coin, visuals of the front and the back of the coins, as well as the value of the coins. And you can see that the value is also represented with base 10 blocks, which is what we will be using as one of our instructional strategies when we are counting like sets of coins, the value of those like sets of coins, and then comparing which value of coins is greater or less or possibly equal to the other set. So that's really a key piece that is different this year for first grade, besides just introducing the quarter, is also that the sets of coins that students will be finding the value of will be like sets of coins. So they may have a set of pennies that they are going to find the value of and then compare it to a set of dimes. So then we'd be counting and finding the value of the dimes and then comparing those. They will not be counting mixed sets of coins like they've done in the past, where you might have pennies, nickels, and dimes all in the same set, and they need to count and find that value. They will not be doing that this year. So let me show that to you and show you a strategy students will be using through one of our problems from a lesson plan on the pacing guide. So this problem says Jackie has 2 quarters. Brian has 4 nickels. Brian says he has more money because he has more coins. Do you agree with Brian's thinking? So as we're thinking about this problem, it's really touching on a pretty common misconception right away, that just because we have more of the coins means it has a greater value. Right? So we really want to emphasize that just because Brian has more coins doesn't necessarily mean that the value of those coins is greater. So we need to do some work to find the value of these sets of coins before we can compare them. Right? So I'm going to get out Jackie's coins here. She has 2 quarters. Right? So I can recognize my quarter here to model 2 quarters for Jackie. And then Brian has 4 nickels. So I'm going to get out Brian's 4 nickels. On this side, you can talk about how you know those are nickels and how you can distinguish them from quarters. That's also something that kids will commonly confuse or mix up because they look so similar in size and color. So talk about how you can distinguish the quarters from the nickels here. But in order to find the value of these sets of coins now, I'm going to model with base 10 blocks. So I know a quarter has a value of 25 cents. So I can model that with my base 10 blocks, right? We can refer back to our anchor chart. If we need to, students can reference this to remember, oh yes, a quarter is worth 25 cents. And I can model the value 25 with 2 tens and 5 ones. Right? You can see we're bringing in that place value understanding from back in the first quarter of modeling with tens and ones. Jackie has 2 quarters, so I'm going to model that 25 cents again with 2 tens and 5 ones. Now I need to count the value of all of my base 10 blocks to determine the value of Jackie's set of coins. Now, one thing just as a teacher note for you here is we haven't added 2 two-digit numbers yet at this point in the year. So I don't want to take these base 10 blocks and put them on a place value chart and start working through adding tens to tens and ones to ones and composing a new 10. That's coming later, right? So I'm not thinking about this as an addition equation. The way I want to model it and think through it is by relying on my place value understanding and my counting strategies. Okay, so we're going to count to find the total value. So one way that I can do this is I see I have some tens. So I could start by labeling and counting by tens to find the value, and I could count 10, 20, 30, 40, right? I've counted forward and backward by tens, thinking about our counting IOA. I've also worked with growing and shrinking patterns where we were counting forward or backwards by tens. So I have a lot of experience with counting by tens as a first grader at this point. Then when I'm looking at my ones, I can start at the 40 and count on by ones to count 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. So counting, I can determine that Jackie has 50 cents. I could write it like that. I could also write it in words. Right? They don't have to show mastery of these symbols, but I can use those to show them that that's how I would indicate that it's 50 cents. Another thing that students may start to do and may start to realize, right, because we have added and subtracted within 20, and we have done some bundling within place value, is they may notice, oh, 5 ones here and another 5 ones, 5 plus 5 equals 10. That would create another group of 10 if I bundled them together. So then I may be able to count 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 to get to that value of 50 cents. Okay, either way, we want students to be flexible, whatever is most efficient for them, but we are relying on those counting strategies. Okay, so now I know the value of Jackie's coins. Next, I need to determine the value of Brian's coins. So I know a nickel has a value of 5 cents, right? Again, if I need to reference my anchor chart, I can, but I'm going to represent each nickel with 5 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. So I have 5 ones represented for each of Brian's nickels. And again, now I need to count to find the total value of Brian's 4 nickels. So one way I could do this, and students can do this, is to count by ones, right? And counting by ones, I would find that his nickels are worth 20 cents. However, thinking about a more efficient strategy or way to look at it, right? If we go back to our understanding of place value, students could see, oh, if I have a group of 10 ones, I can bundle those 10 ones. And by bundling, I would be able to see that I have a group of 10 ones here. And then another group of 10 ones would give me a total of 20. Or I could even think about when I was working with growing patterns and we had growing patterns that increased by 5. Some of your students may even think about this as skip counting by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, if it's increasing by 5 each time. So lots of different strategies and background knowledge that they can rely on. But to figure out that Brian's coins have a value of 20 cents. And once I know the value of both sets of coins, I am able to compare them. So I can say that, okay, I know, right, thinking back to comparing 2-digit numbers, that 50 is greater than 20. So Jackie has more money. Or I could think about it as 20 is less than 50. So Brian has less money than Jackie does. So I would disagree with Brian's thinking. Brian said he had more money because he has more coins. But I disagree because 20 cents is less than 50 cents. So students should also be able to use those comparison symbols that they know to compare. 50 is greater than 20, or I could write it as 20 is less than 50, right? Using those comparison symbols. So that's how students will be working with sets of coins this year. So they will be counting the value of like sets of coins. They will move from base 10 blocks to using a hundreds chart, even going into just some efficient strategies once they know the values of these, of how they would find that total value, but they will all be like sets of coins. And then they should be able to compare the value of those sets of coins. The Georgia DOE's Comprehensive Grade Level Overview states, in mathematics, the emphasis is on the reasoning and thinking about the quantities within mathematical contexts. Specific mathematics strategies for teaching and learning are not mandated by the Georgia Department of Education or assessed on state or federally mandated tests. Students may solve problems in different ways and have the flexibility to choose a mathematical strategy that allows them to make sense of and strategically solve problems using efficient methods that are most comfortable for and make sense to them. It is critical that teachers and parents remain partners to help each child grow to become a mathematically literate citizen. These standards preserve and affirm local control and flexibility. Thank you for joining us for this unit at a glance.